Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Breaking the Game podcast. We are your co-hosts. I'm Stephen Gillespie, and my buddy Austin Carr here is from the Game Change Sports Network. Austin, say something nice to the people.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. How's it going today, Stephen? Having a good day so far?
I am having a great day. I have a second monitor, which you're not going to be able to
Nice.
see, but it feels like I'm at the Pentagon right now.
Right.
I'm the guy in the chair, to quote
Hey,
the
there you go.
Spider-Man movie, right? So,
Mhm.
really excited about today's show, man. This is the first show that we've had, following the completion of the season, other than our post-game show that we did. But,
Right.
the NBA is doing what it normally does and is staying relevant even when there's not a basketball being dribbled.
Never really stops, does it? It seems like as soon as the offseason starts, it just picks up in terms of all these different stories and things that we need to cover. So,
Yeah, and that's why we're here today, because we
Right.
were originally just going to do a show Sunday, and we had a fun idea just to go ahead and put that out there. We're going to do our way too early power rankings. I've already generated my list. I know Austin is working on his and really scrutinizing it. And then we're going to have a very special guest, Jeff Hunt of the Off the Ball Network, the vice president of the network, is going to be a part of our show. So I'm really excited to have him on, and he's going to bring his A game too. But the reason we're having this show today is because we have about 5 different storylines that we want to cover, and we weren't going to be able to do all that and do our way too early power rankings on Sunday. So, we're going to go ahead and dive right in, and we're going to start with your beloved Los Angeles Lakers. Rumors were circulating that Anthony Davis could be on the move to Chicago, because that's just what everyone does in the NBA now, right? Austin, is leave a great situation to go play in their hometown. Not really. We don't see that as much anymore, do we?
Right. It's not something that is as common as I think people would like it to be, or tell themselves that it is. I think I've said it on here before. Not everybody likes their hometown. That's not saying that there aren't people that want to go home, but I can't imagine the pressure you would be under, playing 41 games a year in front of all your friends and family all the time. Just the pressure to get tickets for people, and all the other outside stuff that comes with playing in your hometown.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last player that we saw do this was, LeBron James, but it really wasn't him just going to Cleveland regardless, right? Like, he left a great situation in Miami to go to Cleveland, but they just so happened to have, Kyrie Irving, who was a pretty talented young guy at the time, and then the number 1 overall pick, which eventually they knew that they were going to get a superstar from somewhere, ended up being Kevin Love. So it's not like he just really wanted to go play in Cleveland. There was a little bit of asset management and, a great roster for him to go there too. And looking at AD going to Chicago, some of the talent there is okay. But, I don't know anybody who's just saying, you know what, I really want to go play with Zach LaVine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and especially when coming off of the season that they just had, I could see if Anthony Davis was, had won 2 or 3 titles, or this was like a three-peat, or this wasn't the first year that they had really played together, him and LeBron. And sometimes things get old, things get stale, and sometimes at that point later in your career, you might say, yeah, I want to go home and win one for my hometown team. But in the peak of his career, playing with again with LeBron James, the best player in the world, the situation they're in, I don't see any scenario outside of serious injuries where this Lakers team doesn't compete for the next several seasons. I just think it's as good a situation as there is. He's in the number 1, either biggest or second biggest market, media market outside of New York, maybe. But in terms of royalty in the NBA, it doesn't really get any better than the Lakers. And he has all these options in front of him. The ball's kind of in his court. It's not like where, say even as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, when a big time free agent signs a new contract, he's locking himself into a team for 4, 5, 6 years. We've seen kind of that entire thing change to where more of what you see nowadays is guys getting these 2 and 2s or 1 and 1s, where they sign a 1-year contract with a player option, or a 2-year 2-year contract with a player option for the second year, or the third year, or the fourth year. So he could become a free agent again as early as in 2 seasons, really. I mean, he could go on 1-year deals, which I don't see that happening. But like LeBron's kind of been doing, where he signs like a 2-year deal with a 2-year player option, or we've seen a lot of guys
last season, or until he came to the Lakers, right, 2 seasons ago.
Right. Yeah, he gave them a little bit more of a guarantee, like, hey, I'm going to be here for a while. But I just feel like, with all the options that are there, the situation he's in, the roster in LA, like, this is kind of what I expected. I saw this coming, and it would be nice to, nice problem to have, to be able to opt out of $28 million and say, that's not good enough.
Right. And one thing that we need to remember is we don't know exactly what the cap is going to look like moving forward, based off of, the experience that everybody was under this season, right? With the COVID-19 loss of revenue, ticket prices were accountable for anywhere from 60 to 80% is what I was hearing, depending on the source. And, maybe he's opting out simply because of that, and maybe trying to go for a 1+1 to see if the cap kind of stabilizes or see where it goes moving forward. Don't imagine him signing anything super long term right now, because again, with restrictions on cap space, we don't know exactly where the NBA is financially right now. They may want to wait to sign him. I doubt that it's any hesitation on LA's part. It's probably more so on Anthony Davis saying, I don't know if I'm only going to make, I don't know if I'm only going to make like 25 million this year, as opposed to 30 if I go next season, or maybe upwards of 40 million, depending on where the cap is.
Right. And that's kind of something I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about. I think I've gone on record saying before, due to COVID, I didn't hardly see anybody with a big player option really opting out of it.
Correct.
And obviously that's already, shown to be not the case. What do you think that says in terms of, their confidence that said, hey, I'm going to opt out of almost $30 million. I mean, to me, that kind of makes me feel like that this isn't going to be, the cap's not going to go down too much. I don't know what you think about that, but
so where my head is at now, you consider the players that do have those large player options. A lot of them are older. See Chris Paul. Or injured, see Gordon Hayward, so they're likely not going to see, Chris Paul is going to be making roughly $40 million this season. As great as he was this year, no one is lining up to pay him $40 million, right?
Very true.
Gordon Hayward, if he opts out, he's going to be dropping out of about $30 million. I don't see him commanding that type of money out on the market right now. Now look at Anthony Davis, 27 years old, just won a ring. I don't know another power forward that is in his atmosphere right now as far as how great of a player he is. You could go get another Gordon Hayward. You can kind of maybe sort of get something close to a Chris Paul. You're probably more likely to get something closer to a Chris Paul right now than you are in Anthony Davis, right?
Very true.
I think that he's going to kind of be the exception to the rule that you just said, where a lot of these players that do have the player options, they have them because of contracts that were signed in like 2016 with a big cap spike. So I think it would be foolish to expect other people to opt out simply because Anthony Davis can command that contract no matter what the cap situation is anywhere, right? Which is why I think it was rumored he was linked to all these rumors of, going to Chicago and things like that, because he was going to get that money anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that. That's kind of how I feel about it too. Anthony Davis is one of the few guys that's, even in a pandemic, gonna command that kind of contract. And like we said too, with all the options available, it may be the smartest move to do a 1-and-1 deal. And I almost kind of thought that's part of the reason you're going to see a lot of guys opt into these player options this year, is to give everything another year, see what really happens. And then in 2 years, what is that offseason going to look like? That could just be like a player movement bonanza at that point.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of where I fall to. But like I said, I think this is probably, his agent is pretty world renowned, right? With Anthony Davis, with, he has Rich on his team. So LeBron's agent, he knows he's going to be taken care of, right? So I think this is, like I said, it's probably just a free look at the market for next season is what he's aiming for, because everyone's projecting, because a lot of the owners now lost a lot of money on top of the NBA losing money too, because guys like Tillman Fertitta, the Rockets, who we're going to be talking about in a little bit, he gets a lot of his money from, hotels and
casinos and all that stuff.
Restaurants, right? Like places that have to have people sitting down in them to make money, right? So a lot of these places aren't going to be able to pay players what they probably normally would have anyway. So, which is again why I'm saying I think Anthony Davis, is going to re-sign, but he probably takes a free look at the market next season just to kind of see where it stands.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Another thing too is you mentioned his agent is, rich, and he's got the same agent as LeBron, and KCP too. KCP's another guy that opted out. So, just giving back that little bit of extra money for the team so they can make sure they have enough for Anthony Davis, and then probably pick up the script. No, I don't really think that'll happen. Yeah. I think KCP might actually move on this offseason. I'm not so sure he's coming back. Another guy that, we wanted to talk about a little bit too, Rajon Rondo. I think we can go ahead and segue into that. He's,
I got it scrolling around on the bottom right now.
Hey, perfect. He's set to become a free agent. He opted out of his contract. He had, a player option worth only about $3 million. Yeah, about $2.7 million. It is the league minimum, but I think you'd have to say after this season and after the role he played in the playoffs, he's in line to get at least a little bit more money than that.
Probably somewhere around a mid-level exception on a contender is kind of what I'm seeing. Or, maybe a team that's in a rebuilding situation says, hey, maybe we bring him on. I don't know. With Rondo getting 2 rings now, one in Boston, one in LA, which is phenomenal, by the way. I don't know. It's really tough to read what Rondo wants right now, right? Because if he really wanted a ring, like, he stays, but maybe he can come back for a little bit more money. I'm not sure. I know that they don't really have bird rights on him because he only signed a 1+1 deal on him, and he wasn't on the team prior to, so can't really go into the cap, negative for his contract. So maybe he goes somewhere else. Like, I don't know, a team that is really dying to add a Rajon Rondo, as great as he was. He's kind of a contender only player in my eyes. How do you feel about him, Austin?
I think at this point in his career, and it's been that way for a while, he's kind of, just kind of hopped around from one team to the next, just kind of like a hired gun type of, situation where I think I don't see him having a whole lot of interest in going to Charlotte or, Minnesota, or a team that, is generally considered, not going to compete.
Right.
I also think he may end up back with the Lakers. I hope. I mean, I think he was arguably the 3rd or 4th best player in the playoffs for them.
Especially the last game, right?
Yeah. And, he had several, games like that where he really showed up. But, the last game of the finals was obviously, his best performance for sure with the 19 points. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me being a fan, hoping he comes back. They do have his early bird rights, so they can give him a little bit more money.
Right. Not a full.
Right. Not a ton more. Yeah. But that may be just the only reason they're doing that is he wants a little bit of a raise, and that's a way to give it to him. A 2-year minimum contract for a guy like him. I was kind of surprised that he signed 2 years in the first place and at the league minimum like that. And so it's a 5% increase from year 1 to year 2 if you're on the league minimum. So that's, not a whole lot of money for someone like him. And, maybe his motivation is purely financial. He's never really had that big payday. He's never really made, a huge amount of money in the NBA compared to some of his contemporaries. And, it could be just that, he's got 2 rings now. He's like, hey, I've shown who I am in the playoffs. I've shown what I can do. Let's go make a little bit more money here. And, then I could see him going to a team that maybe isn't quite as, in the championship hunt if they're going to pay him a lot more. But, I think he's got a lot of options ahead of him.
Yeah, and we just got done talking about, the financial, restrictions that are probably going to fall upon the league this offseason. Right. So I don't know how much money you could expect a guy like Rajon Rondo to make as a free agent. Maybe Phoenix could use another ball handling point guard. We saw how great Ricky Rubio was on the squad this season. Maybe they think, championship level experience with Rondo is. I don't really can't think of a lot of teams that can say we're a Rajon Rondo away from doing something special. You know what I mean? And that's not to knock Rondo. We just got done talking how great he was, but he's kind of he's a big personality, excuse me, an enigmatic personality. Blah, blah, blah. Yes.
It's a hard word to say, I think.
It was.
Props for trying it.
I did, and I'm gonna edit that out later.
Hey, it's all good.
Probably not. But anyway, like I said, I can't think of a team that thinks that they're a Rajon Rondo away. I think maybe Miami. I don't know how he would feel about going to Brooklyn to back up Kyrie Irving. These are situations that I think that he could, possibly get into. But again, with free agency this year, it's really hard to, get a finger on a pulse and see exactly who's going to be commanding what, because he's not even going to be probably a top 5 free agent, even though he just got a ring. There's Fred VanVleet plays the same position, is probably going to be in higher demand. But again,
Goran
Dragic is another guy, but just coming off an injury, who knows how that's going to look, right? So anyway, can you think of any other teams that probably feel that way about Rondo?
I don't know if there's a whole lot of teams that think, hey, Rajon Rondo gets us over the hump or takes us to the next level. Maybe the Clippers.
Maybe Philly. I don't imagine him leaving the Lakers for the Clippers, though. That would be nuts.
Yeah, that would be wild. But, people have kind of said they need like a primary ball handler or a little bit more of a,
shot creator,
proven point guard, a guy that can create shots. I could see that possibly. Philly, maybe. Yeah, Philly be a good spot. But do you really want to bring in another point guard that's not really known for his shooting? When
well, I don't know. He did turn his shooting around. In the
he has shot better. He has shot better. So maybe, and
at least he does shoot. So
right. That is true. He does shoot. I was going to say maybe, I even mentioned before how I don't see him going to a team like Minnesota, but the more I think about it, maybe some team brings him in to kind of mentor a young guard, maybe if they take LaMelo Ball and, I know he's not probably going to play the game the same way Rajon Rondo does, but, I feel like he's somebody that a young player could learn from if he's willing to be that guy.
Or even D'Angelo Russell still being there.
Exactly. Both of them, that could work for them. Even like, any, like you said, Phoenix might be a good option for him. I don't think he's going to be heavily in demand. Like you said, I don't know how much more money he's going to command on the open market. I think there's going to be some team somewhere that says, hey, we've got to reach the salary cap floor. We've got $9 million, Rajon Rondo's sitting there, maybe, and
I don't know if he goes, and I don't know if he goes back to a team that he's played for too, because that list got quite long, Chicago, Dallas, Sacramento, New Orleans, like he's pretty well traveled.
And I think he's burned some bridges in some of those places, but I
Dallas.
like Dallas. And I could see in New Orleans, he worked out pretty well in New Orleans. I could see him maybe going back there.
Yeah.
Backing up Lonzo Ball. I don't know. I think there's a lot of options. It's an interesting one to think about. He's a weird case because everywhere he goes, they tend to win.
Yeah.
But his numbers aren't like anything that blow you away, and he's never really had that big contract. So his motivations could be all over the place. I'm not really sure what he thinks is his best interest at this point.
Yeah, he's a hard guy to place, especially like what we said with the money situation, this free agency, the places that he's been, the amount of teams that think that they're a Rajon Rondo away from doing something special. Playing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis probably helped him out quite a bit.
Right.
And obviously getting another ring kind of helps, the reputation side of things. But we mentioned Philly could be a potential place for Rajon Rondo. They have been in the market for assistant coaches, and they landed Dave Joerger to join Doc Rivers as an assistant of sorts in Philadelphia. Austin, what are your thoughts on, Joerger being back in the NBA and then coming back as an assistant under Doc Rivers?
Well, I'd heard rumblings that he might end up as the Pacers head coach. But over the past week or two, I haven't really heard much about that again. And then he just all of a sudden, decided to take this assistant job with Doc Rivers' staff in Philly. I think they're kind of bringing him in to run the defense, I believe is what I've heard. Doc Rivers is on record saying, this is a quote that I'm reading. He said, "My teams have always been very good offensively, in the top 5 overall. We score points. We can score points in a lot of different ways. We've got Ben that scores points, Tobias, Shake, Josh," meaning Richardson. This team's loaded with talent. We've just got to figure out how to make it work best. I just think, he's obviously pretty confident in their offensive side of the ball. And
Sure.
and Dave Joerger is kind of known as a pretty smart guy. He's kind of one of those forward-thinking guys that, if he was in the NFL, he would be one of these offensive coordinators that comes out of nowhere and takes the next big head coaching job. I feel like that's the kind of, at least before he was a head coach the first time, that's definitely the feel I had for him. There's something to be said about too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know if I really subscribe to that. If you look at what the Lakers just did, they had
and the Clippers,
right?
That's kind of a going trend, though. Putting guys with previous head coaching experience in, and the Sacramento Kings, we didn't do this on the show, but they added Alvin Gentry to their team, so it's kind of a going thing.
And another thing I keep hearing a lot about now is that if he doesn't take one of these remaining head spots, that D'Antoni might go be like the lead assistant for Steve Nash.
How crazy would that be?
That'd be pretty cool. I'd be interested to see how that goes, because I feel like, D'Antoni definitely spent the last few kind of against what he really believes in terms of philosophy. Just because, before he went to Houston, it was all about ball movement and get everybody involved. And it just, you've got James Harden, you got to do things a certain way. But I like it. Dave Joerger, I think I was kind of expecting him to be, maybe up for one of these head coaching jobs. So, taking that lead assistant job for Doc, I think, there's worse jobs to have. I was listening to an interview today actually about, the difference between, they were talking to Steve Clifford, and they said, what's the difference between being the lead assistant and being the head coach? And it said, it's night and day. It said, you get to do all the things coaching wise that you want to do without any of the extra stuff around it. You don't have to really answer to the media. You're not really the one getting blamed. You can kind of build a better relationship with the players versus having to be, a little bit more of the judicious head guy that can't play favorites. And so I think there's something to be said about that being a good job to take if you can't get, the head coaching job you're looking at. And, I think it's a good springboard to go from, Doc Rivers lead assistant in Philly, because what if, this team is still really talented. If they figure it out next year and are, a contender or a really good team, automatically, he's going to be in the running for a head coaching job again right away. So.
Oh yeah, sure. We're seeing it right now in LA. We'll talk about some of the, another assistant that played or that coached underneath Doc Rivers is, going to be coaching as a head coach now. Right. And, adding Joerger I thought was great, because Joerger was kind of a player's coach in a sense, especially when he was in Sacramento. I remember that was one of the only coaches that, DeMarcus Cousins had that he wasn't like, outwardly, demonstrative about on the court, when you consider got guys like George Karl and coaches like that. So, I mean, coming out of Memphis, he was kind of known as a defensive minded guy. Obviously, when he played with when he was, there with Lionel Hollins, who is now another one of these guys who was a head coach that is now an assistant, right? His record, he has, basically a 50%, coaching record, right? In Memphis, he had some great teams. Sacramento was a tough gig. And, his last season, he had a 47 win percentage, which was third in the Pacific out of 5 teams, which not bad for Sacramento, considering who they had on that roster at that time. So I don't know. I like the hiring of Joerger, especially as a defensive minded guy. You kind of hope that he can be between him and Doc, they can be guys that can light a match underneath guys like Embiid, who, how I feel about Embiid, that I feel like the narrative that he is, lazy is kind of overblown, because I don't know how you average, 25 and 15 and be called lazy. If that's lazy, I want to see what his full effort looks like. Right. And then Ben Simmons is obviously one of the best perimeter defenders in the game. You got guys who like Al Horford, who was kind of known as a defensive guy when he was in Boston and kind of fell by the wayside here in Philly. That's going to be a tall task for this coaching staff because you're not really going to be able to move Al Horford. Maybe Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid goes, but that's going to be kind of hard to get that defense lined up and getting a guy like Horford to be able to defend some of these smaller guys in the NBA.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I think a little bit of the narrative about the Sixers roster not fitting is a little bit overblown because I think at the end of the day, talent really can kind of mask a lot of inefficiencies. And I like what Doc said about this team wanting to lean into being big. We just saw the Lakers with pretty much a supersized lineup compared to what a lot of teams have nowadays. Pretty much dominate these playoffs and kind of show that they had the flexibility to kind of do everything.
Well, it helps when you got the top 5 players in the NBA on your team.
It does, but I think a lot of people think that if they can make it work and really hone in on one common goal, I think a lot of people think Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, they're not obviously top 5, but are a good enough duo to make a championship run at least. And they've definitely got pieces around them. And I don't know. I feel like this roster is a little bit old school in the sense that it just blows me away that they act like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid can't play together. Like,
yeah,
I know they're not Kobe and Shaq, but Kobe wasn't the greatest shooter when he was there in LA. He had a better mid-range game, but he wasn't a spread the floor, 3-point shooting guard like, a lot of these guys are today. And I think a good solid pick and roll offense and, some different things off of that. It doesn't have to all be drive and kick. It doesn't have to be space the floor and shoot 53s a game. There's other ways. We just saw this Lakers team. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. You look up and down the roster, they don't seem like they have a lot of guys that would really space the floor and scare you from 3. And they didn't really struggle at all. And I think Philadelphia could kind of emulate that to a sense. I've always said, if you take 2 guys of equal skill and one's 6'1" and one's 6'9", I'm going to take the guy who's 6'9" all day.
Yeah.
And, I would like to see Ben Simmons start to at least try to shoot. I think like everybody else.
Has to at least attempt.
Has to at least become, something that the defense has to think about.
Yeah.
Because all that's going to do is open things up for him to attack even more. And the Lakers just won a title relying pretty much on 2 guys and really stout defense. And I think, it's showed in these playoffs that Ben Simmons was hurt, that they weren't the same team. But when he's out there, that the 76ers are an elite defensive team for sure. And, just this idea that they can't make this roster fit. I just think there's so much talent there. It would really surprise me if someone doesn't figure out a way to kind of to make that work a little bit better than it has.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of the quote unquote process really played a part into, the players not really listening to Brett Brown because although it was planned for him to lose, right? Like it's hard when you're used to losing, then all of a sudden like, all right, guys who haven't won before, let's turn it on and listen to me because I know what to do now. It's right. It's really hard to imagine that Brett Brown had control of that locker room, considering that they lost so often.
That's a really good point too. And, they kind of brought up their 2 superstar players, their 2 household names, Embiid and Simmons, were brought up in a losing culture where it was kind of like, these guys are the guys. They're supposed to be our saviors. They're going to be what turns us around. And, it would be hard to kind of take that from, all right, here you guys go, do what you want, play your game your way. Let's see if you can't win us some games to, all right, now we actually have to start competing. You have to do things my way. You have to do things, the way I say, or, if you want it to work, you've got to hold you accountable now, where for 3 or 4 years, we probably didn't. And I think that's some of the story you hear out of Philly is that, Embiid and Simmons were kind of allowed to do whatever they want. And, being a player coach is great. And I think Doc Rivers is kind of known as a player's coach, but he also doesn't seem like the type that's going to just let people get away with anything.
And he's also got championship experience. So I mean, say what you want, and we've had pretty good discussion on where we think Doc Rivers is, but even regardless how you feel about him as a head coach, it's really hard to argue that there are 7 guys ahead of him in today's NBA. So I know his playoff records, I know the 3-1s and all. I got it, but he's still a pretty good head coach, and so you got rid of the coach who had grown accustomed losing, and then all of a sudden players are supposed to buy in to him having the winning formula, and then you take him out and insert a coach with championship experience. I think that that's a last ditch effort you have before you really tear down this roster. Although it is rumored that Doc Rivers really likes LaMelo Ball and is willing to trade probably Ben Simmons in order to get him, which would be crazy. And that's something we could talk about on another show. But moving into another move that has happened over the past couple of days, this actually happened yesterday. Darryl Morey steps down in Houston, and he's basically been tenured there for about 14 seasons, 13 as the lead decision maker. We've seen all kinds of evolutions of this Houston Rockets roster built around. He has a 640 win to 400 loss record. Austin, how blown away were you by the decision for Darryl Morey to step down?
I did not see it coming at all. I kind of was expecting him to, have his fingerprints all over who this next coaching hire would be, some kind of, move in another direction, because it kind of seems like whenever you get the idea of you think what Darryl Morey's thinking, he kind of blows you away with some other, way of thinking, or changes his tune and goes a different direction, or brings in Chris Paul when the team supposedly was over the salary cap, brings in Russell Westbrook when this team supposedly couldn't get any better and didn't have anywhere to go from here, was able to move on from Dwight Howard when Dwight Howard's contract looked like it was going to be hard to move. And he kind of seemed like he's always been a step ahead. But that being said, this is an interesting one. I didn't see it coming, which does kind of make me think that maybe it is, a true story that he wanted to step down and that it was a mutual decision. But, there's a lot of people who think otherwise, and for very good reasons. There's all kinds of layers to this one, if you will. His owner, Tillman Fertitta, we talked about it earlier. As you said, he makes a lot of his money off of tourism, the tourism industry, and restaurants and hotels, and having people, sitting down in
butts and seats.
Yep, butts and seats. And this might be their way of going cheap for a while, to kind of cover their losses. And it also could be backlash from, his remarks against China last year, which, say what you want about that. I try not to get too political. It didn't bother me one way or the other. I didn't really get too deep into what he said. But it did bother enough people that it bothered the Chinese government to the point where the game 6 of the finals was the first game they aired in China in over a year.
And it bothered the even more money that the NBA lost, which I think was the bigger.
Exactly. Yeah. He cost everybody a lot of money. And on top of that, he cost his owner even more money than really anybody else.
Before COVID happened. Which
Just imagine
more of a kick in the crotch.
Just imagine if something happened where for an entire over a year, basketball just stopped being shown on TV here. Like, that's mind blowing. And then you consider the fact that the market in China is significantly larger than the market here. And while there may not be as many, diehard fans there, or maybe there are, but it's a huge market of people. And I think that might have some to do with it. You don't really fire a guy with his track record.
Correct.
8 straight seasons in the playoffs, the most in the NBA. They've kind of been relevant the entire time he's been the GM.
Getting guys like James Harden,
for pennies on the dollar too.
Correct.
That was, to this day, I think will go down as one of the most lopsided trades, in our lifetime in the NBA.
And then the Thunder, one of the biggest what ifs ever.
Yeah, and that's another story that I could talk about all day for a different time. But I have a hard time believing that he's ready to just give up on basketball, as into it as he seems, as if you hear him give interviews, like the guy wrote a play about basketball, like a love story play. It's a little weird, but like it's about a race of like little people that they find out about basketball for the first time, and it's like it's a musical. It's really weird, but he's
that sounds weird. I had no idea that this was.
He did an interview a couple years ago with on the Dan Le Batard show where he talks all about it, and like he's got
that's like the perfect format for him to talk about weird stuff. The Dan Le Batard show is like I'm not a fan. I can't get into it. Like.
I didn't used to be.
Weird.
It is weird, but if you listen to it every day and you start to understand the jokes, it does have some funny stuff to it.
If you dilute yourself and lower your standards.
If you're looking for what we do, in terms of talking about sports and talking about basketball, that's not the place to look, definitely. Right. But there is some entertainment value there.
For me. Like it's just like I'm not even watching anything about sports. This is more like a
So, like you said, it's a perfect opportunity for him to kind of show how weird of a guy he really is. But I just don't think you see a guy whose day job is working 60 hours a week about basketball that goes off in his free time and writes a play about basketball is suddenly so motivated to go do something else in his career, move on to different challenges. Like, I think, you've seen the Rockets more than once have put in like formal complaints to the league and tried to get games replayed. Like I think he was consumed by making it to the finals, and I don't think he willingly stepped away from a team that's never really not competed since he's been there, unless he had another job lined up, which it doesn't look like, at least right away, he's got. But I think he could have one right away if he wanted one. I don't know how you feel about that, but.
I mean, you consider some of the teams that are, some of the decision makers that are in the NBA right now. I mean, 640 and 400. Like, regardless how you feel about James Harden, like this has nothing to do with James Harden. If you're just looking for a guy that is good at making basketball decisions, just basketball, not like geopolitical or whatever. Like just basketball decisions. You could do a lot worse than that. You know what I mean? And. Not willing to crack eggs to make an omelet. I mean, he is that type of dude that he's willing to pick things up. He went small ball this season. What I think happened, right, is basically this is an admission of failure on his part, right? Like to some extent, because if you do have finals expectations, you don't make it, it's a failure. Like look at everyone who's saying to the Clippers right now, that was a failure because they didn't even make the Western Conference Finals. Even though there was a whole bunch of different conditions surrounding the team. They made enough noise where they drew the attention and then they fell short. So that's a failure, right? Same thing goes with the Houston Rockets. You could argue that they were a Chris Paul injury away from, a finals appearance and probably getting a ring. I mean, that's going to go down as another one of the biggest what ifs ever in NBA history. Yeah. It was rumored that after, the loss to the Lakers in Orlando, that he said that he wanted to step down. Something you brought up earlier, Austin. He is going to be a part of the next. He is going to be a part of bringing in the next head coach. So that's going to be kind of his little farewell tour. I don't know if it's going to be kind of a stick it to the man before you leave. I highly doubt it. I feel like he wouldn't do that. Speaking of what you're going to be. To what you brought up as far as what Tillman Fertitta is going to be doing, they're bringing in Raphael Stone, who is like the assistant or vice president of basketball operations. So already an in-house guy, maybe slight pay raise, but he's unproven as being a lead decision maker. Maybe this is just kind of, he's happy to kind of be the lead guy now. Maybe he keeps his current pay and his understanding of the current market. So maybe pinching a little bit of pennies there. But I also think, going back to an admission of failure, I think Darryl Morey kind of looks at this roster, looks at the contract situation there, and is like, I can't do anything with this anymore. Like you mentioned that he's always been able to, flip contracts and stuff like that. If you're Darryl Morey, you can't be the guy that trade James Harden, I don't think, right? I think if it's either you or Harden, Morey's got to go because Harden is an MVP. Say what you want about his play style, it's working for him, to some extent. We can argue that Chris Paul thing again, but I don't really want to. Maybe with Westbrook commanding so much of the salary cap, with Eric Gordon kind of, looks like he's kind of stepped down his, production, and he's commanding a good bit of the salary cap as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a tough sell for anybody to come into Houston to turn this team around. And now there's rumors already is Harden available now and things like that. If they're going to bring in Jeff Van Gundy as their head coach, which it's looking more and more likely, especially with another guy that we're going to talk about here in a second being off the market.
Right. I
don't know how interested Jeff Van Gundy is in a rebuilding project. So I don't think that Harden is going anywhere.
Right.
Westbrook
yet.
Yeah, right. So I don't imagine Westbrook being able to be moved unless it's for another injury-prone guy, like maybe say a John Wall or a Blake Griffin, maybe a Gordon Hayward if you're lucky. I highly doubt that the Celtics are interested in Russell Westbrook, which is another part of the trade aspect I think people ignore is like, how does it help the other team? Because normally teams aren't interested in just loading up talent on one team for nothing. You know what I mean? So having said all that, how do you feel about the future of Houston with Morey stepping down?
Well, it could be just as simple as that he saw the writing on the wall, like you said, that, this might be my best opportunity to step away from the game for a year, check out the landscape, take a look at everything, see what my options are, because, like you said, 640 and 400 is crazy. That's an incredible record. He's going to be, coveted wherever he decides to go. So it may just be that he said, I've done everything I can do, because I think everybody knows. And I think deep down, he kind of knew it too, that there was always kind of a ceiling with this James Harden, Russell Westbrook pairing. Like, I don't think anybody thought, oh man, they upgraded from Chris Paul to Russell Westbrook. Here we go. The Rockets are the favorites.
And gave away a first-round draft pick for their troubles too.
Right. And so, it's not like they have an easy road to bring in new young talent. It's not like they have a bunch of cap space. It's not a very, I don't think. I think it's not going to be very popular in the next couple of years. I think they're going to have some tough times in Houston ahead of them. And it's funny to see how just different one fan base can be than the next versus, one situation versus the next, because I'm sure there's tons of NBA fans that would be happy to be in the Rocket situation year in and year out, at least in the hunt for the playoffs. Houston's a market that's won titles before. That's, obviously you get to a point where, okay, just being there isn't enough. You want to make it to the next level, but they've had a lot of success for a long time. I think everything you said kind of hit the nail on the head about, not wanting to be the guy to trade James Harden, not really, why go through this big rebuild that, you really didn't give yourself a whole lot of wiggle room to get out of a lot of this. It's going to get bad before it gets good there. That's for sure. And unless they just hit in the second round or late first round on some, diamond in the rough superstar, like, which has happened in the NBA before, but you'd have to get really lucky for something like that. For every Jokic you find with the 47th pick or whatever, there's 10,000 other guys that don't work out.
Right. Yeah.
And so
see European basketball.
Right. And there's a lot of facets to this. It tells me them going with his replacement, it could be one of two things. It could be that he did really want to step away and they weren't really prepared for it, or think that, hey, we want to keep going in this direction. This guy's already on board with this. It's been stated that the guys that are taking over are pretty into the small ball idea. They're pretty into the analytics, so it might be the easiest way to just transition when they didn't really necessarily want to lose Darryl Morey, or they got rid of him and replaced him with his assistant because it's cheap, and they know that, like, they see the writing on the wall too, that there's no point in bringing in a big expensive, PM. It's not going to go anywhere. So I don't know. I think if you're a Houston fan, I'm not super excited about your prospects going forward. I hate to say that. I try to give a lot of love, and I always feel like, James Harden is a superstar or close to it, if depending on how you hash that out. But so there's always a chance. They do have a lot of talent on that team. But going forward, they don't really have a whole lot of pretty contracts that look easy to move. They don't have a whole lot of their own picks or extra picks or anything like that. And there's only so much you can do when you're perennially right up against the cap and, aren't drafted fairly high in the draft. It eventually you just kind of run out of ways to, reshape this roster and keep it relevant. So, I think the future's kind of bleak in Houston, but that being said, things could turn around quickly. They get the right coach. They get some new, young, innovative mind in there. Maybe, hopefully, I kind of wish that would be
Jeff Van Gundy.
Yeah, that's going to make even less sense if they hire him and then decide that this team's not going to go any further.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to look good for Van Gundy. I think that.
Right.
I mean, obviously, he's a big boy. He can make his own decisions, but this is going to be a tough situation for Van Gundy to come back into, especially, and maybe that's why Morey didn't want to be the guy to say, "Yeah, I want this to be the head coach."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
because he's kind of an analytical guy. Morey is, and Van Gundy has been on record as being super critical of the NBA. Has been super critical of officiating, which maybe that's why he is a Houston Rocket favorite, because he doesn't like the way games are officiated. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. It does kind of seem to all match up. It seems like they've sent out a lot of mixed signals. Van Gundy tells you that they want to compete again right away. But losing Morey says that, maybe they're worried about money, or maybe he just didn't want to be there anymore. Yeah. Or maybe they just didn't think he was the right guy for the job anymore, which I don't really see that being too much of the case. So
Fertitta has done some crazy moves too to try to avoid repeater luxury taxes and stuff like that, which, I mean, I get he's a successful businessman. Maybe he doesn't want to just give away money for the sake of competing in the NBA. Right. Not every owner does that. So it's crazy. It's a crazy situation in Houston.
It is.
And speaking of crazy situations, a move that we talked about, one that had been rumored for a while. We know that I wasn't a super big fan of this idea, but I'm not the one making decisions, obviously. But Tyronn Lue, or Ty Lue, as he's often referred to as, is replacing his former head coach that he coached with this season as the new head coach in LA for the Clippers, and a guy that I just wish was outright the new head coach now. Chauncey Billups is brought in as the assistant. Austin, how are you feeling about this move for the Clippers?
I don't know if it moves the needle a lot in terms of how much different this team's going to play next year. You bring in a guy that was already in the locker room for a team that reportedly had kind of locker room issues that, didn't really build a chemistry. Did you feel like Cleveland, when he was there, were a team of best friends that all got along and were buddy all the time? Or did they kind of seem like a team that just knew that they were together to try to win a title and put up with each other? I kind of feel the latter more than anything. I never really got the feeling like Kevin Love, Kyrie, and LeBron were, best friends, or like LeBron had a whole lot of, buddies on that roster. And
J.R. Smith, Channing Frye, Richard Jefferson.
True. Yeah, he did have some.
James, Champ was on that squad. So,
yeah.
I mean, he wasn't devoid of, relationships.
Right. It just, I don't know. I didn't feel like Ty Lue came in and built a lot of camaraderie on the bench on that roster, or really
we saw what happened with Kyrie Irving and LeBron, right? So,
and he doesn't get a lot of credit for that ring anyway, which I think is, a little bit naive. I think it takes a good coaching job to win any title, regardless of who's on your team. You have to give the head coach, at least some credit for it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, he's making decisions to some level.
Is he a better coach than Doc Rivers in your mind?
I don't think so. I'm not real high on Ty Lue. to me, I understand the logic in getting and bringing him in. He's won a ring with LeBron, who they're competing against. It's their rival now. I understand why people want this hire to work, and he is like I said, he's a championship head coach. You know what I mean? So I understand it. I do give him some credit for what he did in Cleveland, but I don't know how much I can give, and how, this 40% good enough. I don't know. We just saw LeBron. We've seen LeBron win in 3 separate places, regardless of who the coach is, right? I'm really high on Eric Spoelstra, and we've seen, how successful he's been in Miami. Even just this year, Frank Vogel has had some playoff success and went up against LeBron a lot in the East, and now he got LeBron, and now he's a champion in the West, right? So
Frank Vogel's a guy too that his story's a little weird. He doesn't get a whole lot of credit, but his Indiana teams early in his career kind of overachieved to an extent too. And even now, he comes in his first year with LeBron and wins a title, and it's like, well, how much did he really have to do with it?
Yeah. Well, and he's a defensive guy, and that defense was really good. So again, and Robbie just wrote in and said, got to manage the personalities for sure in the NBA, even if it's not X's and O's, which is what I think that Doc Rivers was there for. I mean, if you want to talk about managing personalities, this guy had Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Rajon Rondo, and Kendrick Perkins, and James Posey, and Sam Cassell, Eddie House. He had, Glenn Big Baby Davis, Leon Poe. He had personalities on that team, and he managed them to get a ring, right? So,
right.
I'm not a big believer in the X's and O's portion of Ty Lue, and I know that that's not everything that goes into coaching in the NBA. I'm very well aware of that. Phil Jackson is, he had one offense that he ran, and it was a system. It wasn't like a play-by-play, this is what you do. It was more like a philosophy, and then, he massaged egos, right? But you got guys like Jerry Sloan and Greg Popovich who are more X's and O's oriented with less personalities and were successful, right? So there's a trade-off there. It's not like people will say, well, the NBA, you have to manage egos. You do, but you also have to, actually coach too, right? So I'm just not a big believer in Ty Lue. And just some stats I want to run by you real quick. Actually, his record. So he was brought on in the 15-16 season, only coached 41 games, which is a half a season. Won 66% of those games and won a championship in his first season. Great start.
Right.
Second season, finally coached his first full year. He went from 66 win percentage to 62 and lost in the finals. Third season, another full season, win percentage dropped again to 61%, lost in the NBA finals, right? So this is where it gets kind of tricky, right? Where you say he lost more every year, made it to the finals 3 times, only won it in his first year on the shorter season, right? And then we all know what happened after that. And then 2018 and 19, he only got to coach 6 games, lost all 6 of those games, and was fired, right? So this is one of those things where, bringing him into a team that's already capable of winning on their own, how much of credit do you give him for coaching that team? You know what I mean? Because, if he goes 0-6 when he's got just a potential all-star in Kevin Love, and they go to an 0-6 start after losing LeBron and Kyrie, how much of it is coaching with Ty Lue if he comes in to be the head coach?
I'm with you. I don't know how much X's and O's wise he moves the needle. Bobby just said I never really liked Ty Lue as a head coach, even though he won. I'm kind of the same way. I kind of feel like when you look on the sideline, and you see him on the bench, does he kind of give you this air of confidence, like he's got everything under control? And I just don't feel that from him. I get that a lot more from Doc Rivers and than I do him, where I feel like he's always, calm, cool, and collected no matter what's going on. He doesn't seem to let things get to really fluster him. And, there were all the things that came out about, having some mental health problems. Ty Lue had some issues with, anxiety brought on, I'm sure, by trying to coach LeBron and the amount of pressure that comes with. And, There's something to be said about that. I'm not taking anything away from him. I think it takes a lot just to even come out and say that, let alone, have to actually deal with it. So I'm not by any means saying that that's a negative on him. I just feel like if that was the issue before, is going to this LA team with Kawhi and Paul George, that, is this going to be any less of a high pressure situation? Because he's going right back in to a much bigger market than Cleveland, where they're expected to win. They're expecting, NBA finals is really, it's pretty obvious with them getting rid of Doc Rivers that at least the conference finals is the minimum of what they expect. And, not only that, it's by far the most publicized instance I remember of hearing about chemistry issues being what derailed a team. So, this is a tall order for anybody coming in.
Well, that and the Lakers when they brought in, Dwight and Nash and
that was another one.
That would probably be the last.
Probably be similar. And Mike Brown got fired pretty quick into that experiment too. I agree with Robbie
Mike
again.
Brown, right? Like Mike Brown in Cleveland, he went to the finals with LeBron James. I mean, how much of that was coaching? Look at that roster that he had. Like, it wasn't completely devoid of talent, but there wasn't like a clear-cut all-star. So, I mean, like, and Mike Brown got chance after chance after chance. Is this going to be kind of a similar situation with Tyronn Lue? I
don't know. I agree with what Robbie said that, it's a downgrade, I think, in my eyes.
To me, it's even more of the same. It's
just like, that's where I was kind of what I was just about to say. It's the same. It's someone right from his coaching staff.
Yeah.
It's, you kind of, like you said, is Doc Rivers one of the 7 best coaches in the NBA? Yeah, sure. I'll give you that. Probably. I do think he's a little overrated, but I don't think there's 6 or more than 6 coaches or 5 even that are better than him. And the only reason you get rid of a coach like that is if you think you're ready to win right now and you need somebody that can come in and do that right away, or B, you think there's some hot young commodity or, new up and comer that's you've got to jump on before he goes somewhere else. And that's obviously not what they thought. Does Ty Lue make you a title contender right away? I mean, his track record says his first year with a team. I mean, the only chance he's had, he's won. So,
I mean, come on though. Like, this is what I'm talking about. When you have prime LeBron James, you have prime Kyrie Irving and prime Kevin Love. Like, and then
how much of it was David Blatt just being in his own way too? David Blatt.
That was such a weird hire too. Let's bring an Israeli head coach, probably really good where he was coaching, right? Like, it's a completely different style of basketball, man. Like,
people wonder why LeBron James left twice. I mean, they make these weird decisions like all throughout his time in Cleveland. We talked about it with your buddies the other day. They refused to trade J.J. Hickson to get Amari Stoudemire. They sign a head coach from Europe with no NBA experience, no NBA relationships really whatsoever. And, they're not exactly the most well-run franchise.
Yeah, ran a Princeton-style offense, too, which, like, come on. Like, that's not going to work, man. And, again, like, what would you say is the biggest thing going in Ty Lue's favor as far as his coaching ability?
The fact that he was a former player, maybe, and that he's from what you hear around the league, he is well-respected by the players. I think probably more so than he is by you or me or the media in general or, most fans. But, I think there's something to be said about that. But I'm not the biggest Ty Lue fan in a lot of different ways. I never really saw how, like, the makings of some great head coach when he played for the Lakers those years, or, when he was a player. He didn't really seem like a guy that was out there running the show, and I know a point guard do that for the most part to an extent, but Chauncey Billups fits that mold to me more than he does.
Correct. Like, he was because Ty Lue, like, to his credit, he was a part of some good teams, but he wasn't like a key.
Never even really a starter.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. But you got a guy like Mr. Big Shot, who has won a ring and has been an all-star and is more accomplished. They could probably speak to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard with more like a, hey, I know exactly how you feel type thing, or exactly what you're going through, as opposed to Ty Lue saying, hey, I remember when I played with Kobe or with, whoever. Like, I remember seeing this guy going through the same situation. Like Chauncey Billups could speak directly to that, and Chauncey Billups is a guy who, started rough, has been on some bad teams and things like that. He'd been on some teams that had high expectations and didn't compete. Like, he knows exactly what these guys are going through, and he's just a sharp guy. Like, I thought he could even go into a front office if he really wanted to, but maybe that's what Ty Lue does. Maybe his biggest edge as a coach is relationships, because if you could bring in a guy that's respected like Chauncey Billups, who did play in that same era as him and probably does have that respect, because this was something that had been rumored that Billups and Lue were going to be linked together, back when Brooklyn was still looking for coaches, or when Philly was rumored to be getting them too. They were like almost a package deal together, which kind of leads me to, does Sam Cassell have something lined up, do you think, or is he going to stay the third coach in LA? Because there's a lot of circulation that he is looking to be a head coach somewhere. There are some openings available. What does this do for Sam Cassell in your eyes?
Well, a couple things about that. First off, Chauncey Billups has been rumored to wanting to be a coach for a while now. If he's wanted to be a head coach for this long, why hasn't he jumped into an assistant spot yet to this point? I think it's kind of, he does have a great track record and a great resume. He was arguably the best or second best player on that Pistons team. If he wasn't the best, he made the most big shots. Obviously, this is where he gets his nickname from.
Mr. Big Shot, yes.
But so there is something to be said there about, he kind of it felt like he was waiting for his opportunity, rather than going out and trying to get it himself.
Yeah, because he was rumored to be the Cavaliers at one point were rumored to be interested in bringing him on.
If you really want to be a coach that bad, take a year as an assistant, sit on the bench, get some coaching experience. And then I'm sure lots of teams would love to have him after a year or two of doing that. And then Sam Cassell's done that. Sam Cassell's been kind of in the same boat. He's won titles before. He's had a great NBA career. He's a little bit older, than Billups, but he's put in the work, and now he gets passed up as the lead assistant by a guy who's been in, the broadcast booth for quite a few years now. I don't know. I could see, I said from a while ago, I thought D'Antoni would fit the Pacers. Maybe he could go there with D'Antoni.
Yeah, I still don't believe it with that roster that is a D'Antoni roster.
I have to start feeling like if they haven't gone after him yet, they don't want him that bad, or he doesn't want to be there that bad. So maybe
there's too many big men on that roster.
Yeah, but I mean, it's easy to move one of those two guys. I think both of them have pretty high value right now. Sabonis is an all-star, and I think you and I both are pretty high on Miles Turner.
Yeah, love Miles Turner.
So, I think that could be something that could be remedied fairly quickly. And, it still may be the case. It may not be. I've heard, Sam Cassell linked to multiple different possible open jobs. The New Orleans job is still open, right?
Yeah. Stan Van Gundy is rumored to be getting that job.
And, that, I wouldn't mind that. I like Stan Van Gundy.
I like Stan over Jeff as a coach.
Me too. And I think Stan's a little more equipped to work with a young roster like that than maybe a lot of these other guys we've been hearing about. But
just don't let him be general manager.
Right. And that doesn't work. If you think about that, I just was listening to an interview about that. The coach has to be emotional. We need to win right now. You need to get me the best players, and we need to win today. Whereas the GM has to be completely,
bird's eye,
devoid of emotion. Can't let any kind of thoughts get in their mind other than what's best for the future of this team. So it's two really totally different jobs that almost are at odds. If you're being really honest about it, because everybody wants to make that move to win right now. But, that's not always the right move to make. And that's that's two really hard jobs to try to juggle. I mean, Doc Rivers couldn't do it. Stan Van Gundy couldn't do it. Popovich did it for a while.
Tom Thibodeau could not do it.
Tom Thibodeau couldn't do it. Popovich and Belichick are the only two coaches in sports in between, the real major sports where it's worked.
But those are the big exceptions, not the rule.
Right. And Belichick is probably the least emotion-driven guy in the history of sports. Like emotion never even enters into it with him, I don't think. He's like a robot. But, so I don't think a good head coach can be a good GM in the NBA because you need someone that's pretty passionate and kind of, let's win now versus a guy that says, hey, we've got to think about the future. But
I would like to see Oklahoma City make a play for Sam Cassell.
Yeah, that'd be another good job for him. I think he deserves a job somewhere. That was kind of my overarching point about all this before we got off topic a little bit.
Oh, it's all right. We do that sometimes.
Right. But, maybe he has something lined up. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe the Pacers will make him their head coach. That'd be kind of cool.
That would be another great one.
I'd like to see him get an opportunity. And I don't think the Pacers job might not be as good as the Pacers think it is. I don't know if
it's probably one of the better ones that are still available though.
Yeah. I mean, I would rather go to Indiana than Houston at this point.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you could,
unless you're just a young first-year head coach that says, okay, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah. Maybe Oklahoma City with all those picks, maybe New Orleans with obviously Zion, like whoever gets paired up with that job is looking to boost their resume, moving forward because you got Ingram, Zion, Lonzo, picks, like
lots of picks, they got, a couple other young, interesting guys, Jackson Hayes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Josh Hart, they got a good young roster there. I still think Kenny Atkinson would be a pretty good head coach in New Orleans with that roster,
Yeah. I mean, and
Robbie just brought up face of the earth.
Yeah, Robbie brought up a cool point, maybe doing the coaching by committee, speaking to what we were saying earlier with the Clippers. That's what I think the NBA is going towards now. I think that you're almost having these all-star, these like super teams of just coaching staffs now is what you're seeing. And, the Clippers did it this year. The Lakers did it this year. You're seeing the 76ers are kind of looking to do that now. It's the Clippers are doing that again this year by bringing in Billups. Maybe Nash and D'Antoni will be together.
The Houston Rockets were kind of the first team I remember hearing about having like a defensive coordinator in basketball.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of, you're right. It is kind of the trend. That's what it's kind of moving to. And, sometimes there is an instance of too many cooks in the kitchen, but I think, everybody kind of said, how long does Frank Vogel have this head coaching job before Jason Kidd takes over? Well, you saw that didn't come to fruition at all.
Well, and now a Kidd is he may be coaching in New Orleans or Houston is another, Houston and New Orleans. It's either going to be they're going for, Kidd and Atkinson, or they're going for the Van Gundy brothers. Like that's what I'm hearing a lot.
Yeah. And, wouldn't it be interesting to see Jason Kidd, who's kind of been talked about, Lonzo Ball's kind of been compared to him a lot.
Yeah.
Get to coach and mentor Lonzo Ball. And, here's something I thought about that was pretty off the wall that, I don't think would ever happen. What if Stan and Jeff decided to team up and coach together?
I don't
see it happening, but it'd be fun.
That it would be.
I would imagine those two. One decides to coach the offense. One decides to coach the defense. We see who fights who first. And I think it'd be dramatic television for sure.
Well, the interesting thing about them coaching Houston and New Orleans is that they would be rivals, within that division, the Southwest division. So that would be kind of interesting to see the Van Gundys go head to head.
In terms of, the coaching carousel and all the different openings and who's getting what job, this is, I feel like, been one of the more unexpected kind of, coaching change periods this year. I've seen some openings that I didn't expect to see. I've seen some openings that I expected to be filled right away, not get filled. There's quite a few open jobs still, and there's a lot of different guys that you first heard were like, Ime Udoka was a name that people brought up a lot that I haven't heard about in weeks. Jason Kidd somebody that everybody said might get a head coaching job, and he's still kind of around there, but I feel like he doesn't have a whole lot of momentum. Kenny Atkinson, I feel like, has just kind of disappeared in terms of,
right.
Coaching. And it was just like, well, Doc Rivers got fired, so let's hire him right away, and then we're going to take his assistant, and it just, I don't know. I feel like there were better options out there.
And New York has probably, like, I'm sorry to hate the bash on the Knicks, but like, could you imagine like the Knicks just for whatever reason, like no other movement was happening. They felt like they had to get Tom Thibodeau right then and there.
Yeah.
And looking at all these other coaches that are moving, Doc Rivers, Jason Kidd, Phil Handy is a guy that everyone is saying that, he should. And you bring up Wes Unseld Jr. a lot. Like they're not getting any shine. And then you got like just perennial retreads and Tom Thibodeau. The Van Gundys should not be allowed to coach anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, time's up, guys. Just stick to what you're doing because you're great at what you're doing and you're making a lot of money. But like, let's get guys like Phil Handy, Wes Unseld Jr., Sam Cassell, guys like that. Let's get them some shine.
I almost feel like I agree with you, but I almost feel like Stan Van Gundy, just listening to him on the radio and on TV as much as I have, he kind of seems like he's settled into this role as like a gap coach, almost like a guy that will come in for a couple years and, help build up your roster, but then he's going to eventually get replaced by the next guy. And that's just, maybe not, maybe that's not, the case, but I kind of feel like if he does go to New Orleans, then that would kind of probably be, the role he's looking to take there, or they're looking for him to take at least. I don't know. I don't know if any NBA championship contending roster is going to look out there and say Stan Van Gundy's our guy.
I don't know how you're an up and coming team like New Orleans and think Van Gundy is going to, take us places. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what I mean. I don't know that he has that reputation. I think it's more like, he's got a lot of NBA knowledge. He can help, kind of develop this young roster until we can find the next guy that we want to be, our championship coach or whatever. I don't know.
It's just crazy. The whole,
there's a lot of different ways all of this could still go.
Yeah. And there could be some job openings available here soon that we didn't know about. I'm surprised that Sacramento is keeping Luke Walton. Like, what the heck is he doing in the NBA right now?
There's another job that should be open that should be going to one of these newer guys.
Yeah, Luke Walton.
Luke Walton's got the name. So,
yeah, he hurt the Lakers and he didn't do anything really for the Kings. And now he's bringing in Alvin Gentry to be his assistant. So, like, and Luke Walton is supposed to be an offensive coach, and he's now bringing in Alvin Gentry. So, admission of defeat.
I don't know. I think, you got to bring in anybody you can at that point in the situation he's in. It kind of seems like, we even said it before. I think Sacramento is just about the only team in the West that has no chance to even compete. Like, the West is going to be loaded from top to bottom. And I mean, they're significantly below just about everybody else, at least in my mind.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about that Sunday when we do our way too early power rankings, which, again, I already have my list together. I don't know where you're at in the development.
I've got it pretty well figured out.
Okay, right on.
It's not as pretty as yours, but it's done.
Well, I actually, Jeff, who's going to be on the show, he's kind of my inspiration as far as, creating graphics and stuff like that. I feel like I'm still drawing in Crown while he's, basically, Bob Ross. But
yeah, some of the guys that do like our Photoshop stuff for GCSN they just blow me away.
Yeah, people just got the skill for it. I'm trying to get better. I like to be able to at least be dangerous when, any aspect that I can be, right? But
for sure.
Yeah, and that's going to wrap it up here for the show. Austin, you got anything for the Game Change Sports Network that you want to throw a plug in there for?
Not anything too much. I'm still working on kind of a big article I should have coming out this weekend. It's the thing everybody loves to talk about so much is why I think LeBron James is my GOAT, and where he's ranks all time. So I'm kind of doing a lot of work on that, trying to get it just perfect where I want it to be. It's going to be a little bit longer read than anything I've probably written before. So I'm pouring all of my efforts into that currently. And then, I'll be doing like a Bears game recap this weekend, which I do every week. So nothing too out of the ordinary yet. I'm working on some things for our show too. So I got a lot of that to keep me busy.
Right on. Yeah. And at the Off the Ball Network, I just did a scouting profile on James Wiseman. Finally got that up. It is available on offtheballnetwork.com. Go and check that out. And Robbie, I just appreciate you hanging out with us for the day, and keeping the comments coming. Robbie, you're a great guest. I look forward to seeing you every time that we do a show. But yeah, go check out Game Change Sports Network. Oh, just a little bit of news for the Off the Ball Network. We got a sponsor. It's Monkey Knife Fight. It's kind of like a DraftKings type thing, like fantasy, betting on sports and stuff like that. So we'll probably have some putting some promos up here on the show just for that, because the show is half brought to you by Off the Ball Network, which is now going to be affiliated with Monkey Knife Fight, which is a pretty interesting name. But yeah, and we got a sponsor for the network now, so
that's awesome.
Pretty good things happening. Oh yeah, man, appreciate it. My president Chris LeBron is doing a lot of great work, man. He does a lot of hustling for the team, and just appreciate all he does. And Chris, if you're watching, just remember I'm saying nice things about you, bro. But anyway, yeah, just anybody watching, listening now and or later, just appreciate love and support. Tell your friends about us. Like, share, subscribe. Leave a review for us on iTunes and Spotify, what have you. Just appreciate the love. And we'll be talking to you guys here within just in the next couple of days. Austin, say something nice to the folks.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for, tuning in. Robbie, thank you for, the great comments and questions and whatever you have to add. We always love to hear it. It makes us, I think it makes it more fun personally.
Oh yeah, I love the dialogue.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. So, anybody that takes time out of their day to actually listen to us or, watch the two of us, go back and forth about this stuff, I appreciate. There's a million other things you could be spending your time on or listening to in your free time. So anybody that listens to us, I've got a ton of love for you guys. Steven does a lot of great work. He's always putting in, extra time outside of the show, getting his stuff ready. He's always got, you're one of the few people that I can honestly say that's ever really changed my perspective on certain things when you and I talk about it. Like, I'm usually pretty like, well, how could you ever see this anyway but this? And then, you've got 18 bullet points about how you could see it from the other side. And I'm like, that does make a lot of sense. So, take that, that's a pretty big compliment coming from me. So.
Well, I don't take it lightly, man. I know that you know your stuff. And if I can get you to at least see another point of view, like that's that means a lot. And just same in return for you. Your knowledge of the game. Obviously, I respected it enough to take my show solo by myself and co-host it with you. So
yeah, I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, man. Well, all right. We can say nice things about each other later. Let the folks go. We actually cut the show short, only an hour and 17 minutes.
I know, man. I feel like this is like a record for us.
Well, let's end on a high note, Austin.
For sure.
We'll catch you guys next time. Thank you for watching and listening, and we will see you guys Sunday. Much love, everybody.
Have a good one.